The opening night of the Saveur d'Afrique restaurant was the moment Amadou Diop had worked his entire life for. At 35, after training at the best culinary schools in France and internships at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world, the Senegalese chef finally opened his own restaurant in Dakar. The restaurant occupied a restored colonial building overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, decorated with dark woods, gilded metals, and contemporary African art. Amadou paced the main dining room, obsessively adjusting the position of each piece of cutlery, inspecting each glass for invisible stains. His dark, piercing eyes were unforgiving of imperfections. His team moved in calculated silence around him, like dancers trying not to disturb the demanding choreographer. "This towel has a wrinkle," he said coldly to one of the employees. "Change it immediately, and inform the laundry that this kind of sloppiness is unacceptable." The young assistant rushed to answer, while the sous chef approached nervously. "Chef, guests will begin arriving in 20 minutes. The mise en place is complete." Amadou simply nodded without thanking her. In his mind, competence was an obligation, not a cause for celebration. He had sacrificed so much to get here, giving up marriage, children, a social life. Every penny saved, every hour of sleep lost, all for this moment. He would be the first Senegalese chef to earn a Michelin star, putting African cuisine on the world map. Guests included international critics, investors, and representatives from Continental, Africa's largest hotel group, which had partially financed the project. Nothing could go wrong. Dinner began promptly at 8 o'clock. The main room was packed with Dakar's elite and international guests, including the feared French critic Catherine Dubois, known for destroying reputations with her sharp pen. Ibrahim Ndiaye, a 60-year-old man with graying hair and a reserved demeanor, moved silently between the tables. Unlike the other young, energetic waiters, he had calloused hands and a weather-beaten face. He had been hired at the last minute after an employee quit, and his experience was questionable. However, he served with quiet dignity, observing each customer closely. The main table, where Catherine Dubois sat alongside key executives, hosted the full tasting menu. Amadou personally oversaw each dish as it emerged from the kitchen, eloquently describing the fusion of French techniques and traditional Senegalese ingredients. Ibrahim approached to pour a rare South African white wine. As he carefully tilted the bottle, his elbow lightly touched the water glass, spilling a few drops onto the pristine white tablecloth. Time seemed to freeze. Amadou, who was overseeing the service, paled before his face transformed into a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed at first, before his voice rose. "You incompetent! Do you have any idea what you just did?" Customers stopped their conversations. Catherine Dubois raised an eyebrow, observing the scene with clinical interest. "Sir, I apologize. It was just..." Ibrahim began calmly. "People like you will never understand excellence," Amadou interrupted, completely losing his composure. "How dare you ruin the most important moment of my life with your incompetence? This is no place for amateurs. You're fired. Get out of my sight right now." An icy silence fell over the room. Ibrahim, with surprising dignity, simply bowed slightly, placed the bottle of wine on the side table, and calmly walked toward the service exit, showing neither humiliation nor anger. Catherine Dubois made a note in her small notebook. The luxury penthouse at the Marina Bay Hotel was a study in the contrast between simplicity and sophistication. Large windows revealed the illuminated Dakar skyline, while designer furniture and contemporary African art decorated the minimalist space. Ibrahim Ndiaye, or rather Ibrahim Assal, watched the city from his balcony, still wearing his waiter's uniform, only his jacket removed. At 60, he was the richest man in West Africa, founder and owner of the Continental chain, with more than 50 hotels and resorts in 12 countries. "Your tea, sir," said Fatou Diallo, his executive assistant of 15 years, placing a plain cup of hibiscus tea on the side table. "Thank you, Fatou," he replied with a tired smile. "Interesting evening, don't you think? Chef Amadou certainly has a temper," she observed diplomatically. Ibrahima laughed softly. "You're being generous. He has undeniable talent, but..." His voice trailed off as he unconsciously touched the scar on his left hand, a reminder of the days he worked in the kitchen of his first restaurant. The son of an illiterate fisherman, Ibrahima had started out as a dishwasher at age 13. His journey to hospitality mogul was legendary in the African business world, but few knew of his eccentric habit. working incognito in his own companies to gauge the true organizational culture. "The restaurant has extraordinary potential," reflected Ibrahima. "The food is magnificent, the location is perfect, but you don't invest in people who don't respect other people," Fatu added, knowing her boss's philosophy well. "Exactly." Ibrahima placed the empty cup on the table. "We will implement our special review process. Tomorrow, announce a full review of all the group's operations in Dakar, with rumors of possible closures." "And the next step?" Fatu asked, already taking notes on her tablet. "You'll be our official observer. I want to know everything about this brilliant chef who can't see the value in the people around him." The atmosphere on the Saveur d'Afrique was tense the next morning. The crew spoke in whispers about the previous night's incident and the Continental Network's corporate announcement. A full review of operations with possible restructurings due to cultural incompatibilities. Amadou arrived earlier than usual, with dark circles under his eyes. Despite his behavior the night before, the dinner had been a culinary success. But there was still no news from critic Catherine Dubois, and the silence worried him. "Chef, there's a Continental representative here to see you," the maitre d' informed nervously. Amadou adjusted his jacket and plastered on a smile before entering his office, where he found an elegant woman in her 40s, dressed in an impeccable suit and with an analytical expression. "I'm Fatou Diallo, Senior Cultural Development Consultant at Continental Network," she introduced herself with a firm handshake. "I'm here to observe operations as part of our assessment." "It's a pleasure, Madame Diallo. We are honored to welcome you," Amadou replied with studied formality. "I assume this is about last night's incident? I can assure you it was an unfortunate exception." "I'm not here because of a specific incident," she replied, neither confirming nor denying any knowledge. "I'm here to understand the culture you're building. Mr. Sal, our founder, believes that the true essence of a business lies in how people are treated, both customers and employees." Of course," Amadou agreed, trying to hide his discomfort. "We demand excellence, but we value our team." "Excellent," Fatou smiled. "Then you won't mind if I implement some cultural experiments during my evaluation? I have direct authority from the founder to make temporary operational adjustments." Amadou swallowed hard. Refusing would be professional suicide, considering that Rede Continental was his main investor. "It will be a pleasure to collaborate," he said, forcing a smile. The Pan-African Gastronomic Festival was the continent's most prestigious event. Held at the Dakar Convention Center, it brought together Africa's greatest culinary talents, international critics, and food lovers. Amadou moved between stations with renewed confidence. His competition dish, a modernist reinterpretation of the traditional Senegalese thiboudien, had been highly praised. Even with Fatou Diallo's constant observation over the past 2 weeks and the disconcerting changes she had been implementing, his confidence in his talent remained unshaken. That's when he spotted a familiar figure chatting animatedly with legendary Moroccan chef Hassan Benani. It was Ibrahim, the waiter he'd fired, but now dressed in an elegant Italian suit and treated with obvious deference. Intrigued and alarmed, Amadou tried to sneak up on the conversation. "Your take on integrating traditional Berber preservation techniques with contemporary methods is fascinating, Mr. Sel," the Moroccan chef said respectfully. "Your knowledge of African gastronomic anthropology is truly impressive." "Mr. Sal?" Amadou frowned, stepping closer, when he felt a firm hand on his arm. "Chef Diop, Miss Dubois is looking for you," said a tall, security-looking man, effectively blocking his path. Forced to change direction, Amadou watched from afar as Ibrahim, or was it Mr. Sal, was led to a VIP table where the continent's most renowned chefs presented their dishes especially for him, as if he were some kind of supreme authority. Later, when he managed to get a moment alone with Fatou, Amadou couldn't resist his curiosity. "That man with Chef Benani, is that the same waiter who worked at my restaurant?" "Oh, you noticed?" she replied with a small smile. "Maybe not everything is as it seems, Chef Diop. Sometimes the most valuable people are the ones we overlook." "This is absolutely unacceptable," Amadou protested, staring at the new restaurant layout Fatou had implemented. "Communal tables? This is a fine dining restaurant, not a cafeteria." Fatou remained unfazed, consulting her tablet. "Our research shows that contemporary diners value authentic experiences and human connections as much as high-end cuisine." The restaurant had been partially reorganized. In addition to the traditional tables, there were now 2 large communal tables where strangers would share meals side by side. Even more disturbing, Fatu had announced an internship program for young people from Dakar's underprivileged neighborhoods and a new rule requiring all chefs, including Amadou, to wait tables regularly. This diminishes my authority and devalues my education, he argued. I'm an executive chef, not a waiter. What about these young people with no experience? My restaurant is not a charity. Fatu put the tablet aside and looked directly at Amadou. What is a restaurant really, Chef Diop? A temple to your technique and ego? Or a space where people connect through food and hospitality? It's an institution of excellence, he replied automatically. And what is excellence? She countered. Just perfect technical execution or something deeper? Mister. Saul believes that excellence in hospitality means creating experiences that touch both the stomach and the heart. Amadou crossed his arms defensively, but there was no immediate response. This is a temporary experiment, Fatu continued softly. Consider it an opportunity to expand your definition of gastronomy. Or would you prefer I report resistance to management? That night, with stiff formality, Amadou personally served his first dish to a family of American tourists. To his shock, the experience of directly explaining his creation and witnessing the genuine reactions of pleasure on the diners' faces provoked a strangely satisfying feeling he had never experienced in the kitchen. The news arrived like a tsunami. Jean-Pierre Leclerc, Europe's most influential food critic, was in Dakar and would visit the restaurant anonymously that night. Amadou and his team worked frantically to ensure absolute perfection in every detail. Sir, there's someone wanting to speak to you at the service entrance, one of the assistants informed him. To his utter shock, Amadou found Ibrahim, the waiter he had fired, dressed again in a waiter's uniform. What are you doing here? He asked, disconcerted. Miss Diallo rehired me, Ibrahim replied simply, with his slight accent of a late learner of French. She said I needed it for special work today. Is this some kind of joke? Amadou almost shouted, searching Fatu with his eyes. She calmly appeared in the hallway. Mr. Ibrahim has specific expertise we need tonight. Trust the process, Chef Diop. Against his will, Amadou was forced to accept the situation. The evening progressed tensely until Fatu discreetly pointed out a middle-aged man dining alone in a corner, Jean-Pierre Leclerc. To Amadou's horror, Ibrahim was assigned to serve the critic. He watched anxiously as the elderly waiter approached the table with that same calm dignity. To his surprise, the critic and Ibrahim were soon engaged in animated conversation, with the waiter describing each dish with surprising knowledge of techniques and ingredients. This fermentation technique comes from the Wolof tradition, adapted by Chef Diop with modern molecular influence, Ibrahim explained with unexpected eloquence. Watch how the flavors transform in your mouth, revealing layers of complexity. Leclerc seemed enchanted, not only by the food, but by the stories and cultural context Ibrahim offered with each dish. When the critic left, he greeted Ibrahim warmly and respectfully, completely ignoring Amadou, who was waiting anxiously near the door. 3 days later, the review was published. The food received technical praise, but the highlight was the soul and authentic hospitality, especially from the extraordinary waiter who transformed a simple meal into a cultural journey through the soul of West Africa, an element far more impactful than the kitchen's occasionally empty technical perfectionism. The storm arrived without warning, a rare phenomenon for the Dakar season. The skies darkened dramatically in the middle of dinner service, and minutes later, the electricity went out throughout the neighborhood. Panic immediately set in the kitchen. Dishes were left unfinished, refrigeration systems were down, and the digital reservation system was inaccessible. In the dining room, customers began to express dissatisfaction, checking their watches and murmuring about missed appointments. We can't continue the service, Amadou declared, running his hands through his hair in despair. We'll have to ask the customers to leave and compensate them later. As the team prepared to begin the evacuation process, Ibrahim silently began lighting handmade candles he found in the supply closet, placing them strategically around the room. The room was instantly transformed, creating an intimate and almost magical setting. What are you doing? Asked Amadou. In my village, Ibrahim replied calmly. When there is no light, that is when the best stories are told. Without waiting for approval, Ibrahim headed to the center of the restaurant. Respected guests, he announced in a surprisingly commanding voice. Tonight, we are honored to experience an authentic traditional African dining experience, a candlelit dinner as our ancestors did, when food was not just nourishment, but communion. To Amadou's surprise, the customers, instead of being irritated, seemed intrigued. Ibrahim continued, moving gracefully between the tables. This dish you are enjoying carries centuries-old stories. In the Wolof tradition, we believe that each ingredient carries with it the energy of those who cultivated it. Soon, Ibrahim was narrating fascinating stories about the origins of dishes, African food traditions, and how preservation techniques have evolved through generations. Diners were completely engaged, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. From the kitchen entrance, Amadou watched in amazement as Ibrahim turned a potential disaster into a memorable experience. At one point, he noticed that customers had spontaneously begun sharing food between tables, chatting with strangers like old friends. When the power finally returned 3 hours later, several customers expressed disappointment and asked that the main lights remain off. At the end of the evening, an elderly customer hugged Ibrahim with emotion. "This was the most meaningful meal I've ever had. You reconnected me with my own roots, young lady. Thank you." A week after the storm incident, which had become legendary in Dakar's gastronomic circles, Amadou was working late in his office, reviewing recipes. The restaurant was empty except for the cleaning staff. Needing to consult some of Fatu's notes about the upcoming corporate event, he entered the small room she was temporarily using. While searching through the filing cabinet, a document accidentally fell off the shelf. It was an internal report from Continental Network, stamped "Confidential" in red. Ethics dictated he should ignore it, but one name caught his attention. Ibrahima Sal, Field Personnel Assessment. Reluctantly, but consumed by curiosity, Amadou read the document. It was a professional biography of the founder of Continental. Born in a fishing village, he had started as a dishwasher at age 13 after his father's death, working tirelessly until opening his first establishment at 23. Now, at 60, he controlled Africa's largest hotel and restaurant empire. What caught Amadou's attention most was a highlighted paragraph about Sal's business philosophy. All new establishments go through the founder's protocol. Ibrahima Sal personally works undercover at each new venture for 1 to 3 months, before opening or after acquisition. His unwavering belief: how a leader treats the seemingly least important employee reveals their true character and ability to build sustainable excellence. Below, a handwritten note. Final evaluation of Saveur d'Afrique, scheduled for 10:04, decision on continuation of the partnership. Amadou felt his blood run cold. April 10th, just 3 days away, and a terrifying connection began to form in his mind. Ibrahim, the waiter he had publicly humiliated. Was that possible? Just then, he heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly replaced the document in the file cabinet. When he turned, he found Fatu in the doorway, watching him with an enigmatic expression. "Did you find what you were looking for, Chef Diop?" she asked calmly. "Yes," he replied hoarsely. "I think I finally found it." In the following days, Amadou observed Ibrahim with a new perspective, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. His elegant posture despite his apparent simplicity, the natural respect he commanded from the team, his encyclopedic knowledge of gastronomy that went far beyond what one would expect from a simple waiter. Discreetly, she began investigating him. She discovered that Ibrahim arrived in a modest car, but was dropped off by a driver who waited patiently in the parking lot. She noticed how he occasionally spoke on the phone in fluent English, unlike the basic French he used in the restaurant. During a quiet afternoon, Amadou observed something even more revealing. Ibrahim patiently teaching service techniques to Omar, the young intern in the inclusion program, with the methodological precision of a master. "See, my son," Ibrahim said. "Holding the bottle this way protects the label and shows respect for the producer. Every gesture in the service is a small ceremony that honors the work of many invisible hands." Omar, normally shy and insecure, flourished under this gentle guidance, repeatedly trying until he mastered the movement. That night, Amadou discreetly followed Ibrahim after work. As he suspected, the elderly waiter was escorted by his driver to the service entrance of the luxurious Marina Bay Hotel, the headquarters of the Continental chain. The next morning, Amadou found Ibrahim arriving early to prepare the hall. "Can we talk in private?" he asked, leading him to the restaurant's inner courtyard. "I know who you are," Amadou said directly, watching the older man's reaction closely. Ibrahim merely raised an eyebrow, his face remaining impassive. "I want to apologize for the way I treated you on Inauguration Day," Amadou continued. "It was unforgivable, no matter who you are." A small smile appeared on Ibrahim's face. Apology accepted, Chef Diop. But why do you think I'm anything other than a simple waiter? Because simple waiters don't converse as equals with Africa's greatest chefs, they don't turn disasters into magical experiences, and they certainly aren't dropped off by private drivers at the Marina Bay Hotel. Ibrahim laughed softly. A shrewd observation. But know that it's not me you're hurting with your arrogance, Chef Diop, but yourself and your art. True gastronomy doesn't exist in the isolation of the kitchen or in technical perfection. It lives in the moment of human connection that food provides. Before Amadou could respond, Fatou appeared, summoning Ibrahim for an urgent call, and the moment passed, leaving the chef with even more questions. The announcement came as an earthquake. Continental would organize a special dinner for strategic partners at Saveur d'Afrique, with the presence of international executives who would decide the future of the group's investments in Dakar. The pressure on Amadou was overwhelming. This would be the final trial, and he was determined to create the most extraordinary menu of his career. The team was working frantically on preparations when disaster struck. Moussa, his sous chef and right-hand man for 5 years, collapsed in the kitchen with a high fever, malaria, according to the hurriedly summoned doctor. It's impossible to replace him at this point, Amadou lamented to Fatou. We need to postpone the event. Impossible, she replied firmly. Executives have strictly scheduled agendas. Dinner happens today, with or without your sous chef. Then we are doomed, Amadou concluded, defeated. Unless... Fatou looked meaningfully at Ibrahim, who was discreetly organizing the hall. Him? As a waiter in the kitchen? Amadou asked in disbelief. Perhaps there's more to him than meets the eye, Fatou suggested. What alternative do we have? Reluctant and skeptical, Amadou accepted the suggestion. To his amazement, as soon as Ibrahim donned his kitchen uniform, his posture and energy changed subtly. He moved with the fluid efficiency of someone familiar with the professional culinary environment. As they prepared their signature dishes, Amadou witnessed something extraordinary. Ibrahim handled ingredients with the precision of a master, using techniques unknown to him. When they got to the main course, a reinterpretation of the traditional maf with lamb, Ibrahim respectfully suggested, "If I may, chef, this traditional peanut aging technique could intensify the flavors." Initially skeptical, Amadou watched as Ibrahim demonstrated an ancient method of controlled fermentation that completely transformed the sauce's flavor profile. How did you learn that?" asked Amadou, tasting the result with genuine admiration. "My grandmother," Ibrahim smiled, "a woman who never attended culinary school, but fed generations with practical wisdom passed down for centuries." For the first time in his career, Amadou truly felt like an apprentice. "Could you teach me how you did that?" "With pleasure," Ibrahim replied, without condescension or arrogance. In traditional African cuisine, we consider that knowledge belongs not to the individual, but to the community. Sharing techniques does not diminish the master, it multiplies excellence. That evening of service became a harmonious dance between modern technique and ancient wisdom. The executives were visibly impressed, and Amadou for the first time felt the genuine pleasure of creating not to impress, but to nourish and connect. Days after the successful dinner, Amadou received a surprising proposal. Claude Bergeron, CEO of Luxe Mondiale, a European hotel conglomerate that rivaled Continental, offered him a position as a celebrity chef at a new luxury restaurant chain. "Impressive," Amadou commented, reading the terms of the contract in his office. "Exorbitant salary, international exposure, television shows. There's one condition," the conglomerate representative explained. "We need you to bring with you exclusive recipes and techniques developed here. Specifically that fascinating peanut fermentation technique you used at the last event." Amadou felt a weight in his stomach. The technique wasn't his own, it was traditional knowledge Ibrahim had generously shared. "I need time to consider," he replied cautiously. That night, alone in his apartment, Amadou faced his ethical dilemma. The offer represented everything he'd ever dreamed of: international fame, recognition, financial security. But should he sell as his own an ancient technique shared in trust? And abandon the restaurant that represented the investment of so many people? He fell asleep restlessly and dreamed vividly. He was in a luxurious restaurant in Paris, acclaimed worldwide, but completely alone in a sterile kitchen, preparing technically perfect dishes that no one truly appreciated. He woke with a disturbing clarity about the kind of chef and man he was becoming. The next morning, he found Ibrahim calmly preparing the mise en place for lunch. "How do you know when you're on the right path?" Amadou asked abruptly. Ibrahim considered the question for a moment. "When your success lifts others up along with you, rather than being built upon them," he replied simply. "When excellence serves a purpose greater than ego." That afternoon, Amadou formally declined Lux Mondial's offer, citing ethical incompatibility. For the first time in years, he felt a strange sense of lightness, as if he had passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. A competition? Amadou reread the official Continental Network memo in disbelief. Among all the chefs at the group's establishments? "A final assessment," Fatou confirmed. "Restaurants that demonstrate alignment with the group's core philosophy will continue to receive investment. The others," she trailed off. The competition had a perplexing theme: roots and renewal, honoring the humble origins of African gastronomy. Chefs were required to create dishes using accessible ingredients and traditional techniques, with an explicit emphasis on hospitality as an expression of shared humanity. For Amadou, traditionally focused on sophisticated techniques and elaborate presentations, the challenge was completely outside his comfort zone. "How do I impress with simplicity?" he muttered, frustrated, as the team brainstormed ideas. It was Omar, the young intern, who unexpectedly offered a transformative perspective. "Chef, my grandmother says we cook not to impress, but to nourish body and spirit. Maybe it's not about impressing, but about connecting." Amadou looked at the young man with new appreciation. For weeks, he had been so focused on his own concerns that he had barely noticed Omar's blossoming under Ibrahim's patient guidance. "Go on," he encouraged, genuinely interested. "In my neighborhood," Omar explained, gaining confidence, "when someone receives a guest, we offer tea boudin even if it's simple, because sharing the best we have, however humble, is true hospitality." An idea began to form in Amadou's mind. He called the entire team, not just the chefs, but also the waiters, dishwashers, and receptionists, to an unprecedented meeting. "I want to hear from each of you," he announced. "What dishes represent genuine hospitality in your families, your villages, your childhoods?" For hours, the team shared stories, recipes, and memories. Ibrahim watched silently, a small smile on his lips. Gradually, a collaborative menu took shape, a journey through the culinary traditions of Senegal's different regions and social classes, each dish telling a personal story from someone on the team. On the eve of the competition, while they were finalizing preparations, Amadou gathered the entire team together again. "Tomorrow, we're not just serving food, not even just stories," he said with genuine humility. "We're serving our shared humanity. We're not serving ego, we're serving people." Ibrahim, at the back of the room, nodded almost imperceptibly. The day of the final competition turned into a media event. Corporate representatives, food critics, and television cameras filled the Saveur d'Afrique. A panel of judges waited at the main table, their identities kept secret until the last moment. The team worked in unprecedented harmony, chefs, waiters, and assistants moving as a cohesive organism, each person playing an essential role in the experience they collectively created. The menu told a story, starting with a humble fish broth inspired by Dakar's fishing origins, evolving through dishes representing different regions and traditions, culminating in a collaborative dessert that symbolized the future of Senegalese gastronomy. Traditional in essence, contemporary in presentation. More surprising was Amadou's transformation. Instead of commanding authoritatively from the kitchen, he moved between the dining room and backstage, personally presenting each dish alongside the team member whose family story had inspired him. When the last course was served, Fatou stood up to make an announcement. The restaurant fell silent in tense anticipation. Before the final decision, our founder and president would like to share a few words. To the utter shock of almost everyone present, Ibrahim rose from the judges' table. With calm gestures, he removed his discreet disguise, the fake gray beard, the simple glasses, the padding that altered his silhouette. "I'm Ibrahima Sall," he announced in a clear, commanding voice, completely different from the humble tone he used as a waiter. Founder of the Continental Network and, for the past few weeks, a waiter at Saveur d'Afrique. A murmur of astonishment ran through the room. Amadou remained motionless, his suspicion finally confirmed. "I started life as a fisherman's son," Sall continued, his magnetic presence dominating the room. "At 13, I was working as a dishwasher, often belittled and humiliated by chefs who believed that technique replaced humanity. He walked around the room as he spoke, his natural elegance now evident to all. When I built my first restaurant, I promised to create spaces where every person, from the dishwasher to the executive chef, would be valued for their essential contribution. This philosophy built our empire. To preserve it, I work undercover in each establishment, believing that the true measure of a chef is not how they treat critics, but how they treat those who seemingly have nothing to offer in return. His gaze met Amadou's. No accusation, just calm assessment. Chef Diop and I started imperfectly, he smiled, eliciting nervous laughter. But I've witnessed something rare and precious in the past few weeks. True transformation. An extraordinary talent who discovered that excellence without humanity is like a dish without a soul. It may impress momentarily, but never truly nourish. Sal gestured widely, including the entire team in his next comment. What they created today was not just an exceptional menu, but a model of inclusive gastronomy, where sophisticated technique and ancient wisdom coexist, where every contributor is valued, where diners of all backgrounds are welcomed with equal reverence. Turning to Amadou, Sal extended his hand. Instead of the closure you might have feared, I offer an expanded partnership, transforming Saveur d'Afrique into our model establishment for this new gastronomic philosophy, with you and your team leading the way. Your journey demonstrates precisely what we value, not immutable perfection, but growth, humanity, and the capacity for evolution. Amadou accepted the outstretched hand, unable to find words suitable for the moment. A year later, Saveur d'Afrique received its first Michelin star, the first restaurant in Dakar to achieve such recognition. The review specifically cited the extraordinary integration of refined technique with authentic hospitality and ancestral cultural wisdom. The restaurant had become a symbol of a new gastronomic approach that was transforming the African culinary scene. International chefs traveled to learn its innovative model of inclusive gastronomy. Amadou had implemented a daily ritual. Before each service, the entire team, from the newest assistant to the executive chef, shared a communal meal, reaffirming that they were family first, professionals second. On that special afternoon celebrating the star, the restaurant was closed to the public for a charity event dedicated to young people from underprivileged communities interested in gastronomy. Amadou personally served the guests, while Ibrahima Sall worked alongside him as an assistant. At one point, one of the young chefs in training began impatiently criticizing a colleague for a minor service error. Amadou gently intervened, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder. "Let me share the most valuable lesson I've learned on my journey," he said softly. In gastronomy, as in life, technique without humanity is like a dish without soul. It may impress momentarily, but never truly nourish. From a discreet corner of the room, Ibrahima Sall watched with quiet satisfaction, witnessing the complete cycle of transformation. The true purpose of his empire had never been to build restaurants, but to cultivate humanity, one heart and one conscience at a time.